All right, just a quick video to cover the new overtime tracking system and the spreadsheet that we use to track it. The spreadsheet is located in the overtime reports folder, the same place on the server that all the overtime reports have always been. The file is called 2019 overtime tracking, and this is what it looks like. So this is going to serve the same function as the overtime book currently does, just to track overtime. As you can see, it's color-coded for pass or taking, and then the black marks are just to mark people ineligible or to otherwise close out that column. So let's just get started filling one. So for our example, let's say we are filling a shift of overtime today. The date of the overtime occurs is tomorrow. I'm filling it, and the reason for the overtime is because Dan's on vacation. So in this instance, we know where to start based on the column before it. We start calling overtime based on who took the overtime last. So you can see that Jan took the overtime last. So we just go over and down. So we're in our column of the shift we're filling and start with Lewis. Each column is a shift of overtime we're filling. So at that point, you just start calling people and putting answer, or it's they pass, then you just type pass. Because this is Dan's shift, he obviously isn't eligible to work it. So an X will put a black spot in it. Pass changes it to red, and X makes it black. So let's say that Jason takes the overtime. You just put in a number. Any number between 12 and 24 will turn that position green. Anything less than 12 hours, you're not even using this system anyway. It's not coming out of the book. So those will be the only things you'll need is between 12 and 24. Just put in how long the shift of overtime is. At that point, you blank out the rest of that column. Everybody's name gets a black spot because they never got a phone call. That shows that column is complete. When you're done filling a shift of overtime, every spot in that column should have either a green spot, a red spot, or a black spot because it's a new column for every shift. There are a few exceptions to that when filling for military leave or for work comp, but I'll discuss that in another video. The firefighter overtime looks identical to the officer overtime, and you can change between the two just by clicking these tabs. Now, these columns may not always line up because you don't have to mark out an entire column on the firefighter overtime just because you're filling officer overtime unless you have to start calling firefighters for that overtime. So we'll do that as an example. So let's say we're calling on the 10th for overtime on the 11th. And we'll say that that is the 11th of platoon 3 day, just for this example. So Tim's on vacation. So we know where to start because Settle took the last overtime. So we go over into the column we are currently using and go down to Brad. Brad doesn't want it. Hope I typed in the right spot. So Brad's going to pass on the overtime. So that takes us back to the top of the column, which is Scott. So he'll pass. That's a pass. Benton's already on his shift, so he obviously can't work overtime on his shift. It's Tim's shift, so he can't work it. Again, on platoon 3, so he can't work it. So if everybody passes, this column is full for the officers. So now we have to start calling firefighters. So you'll need to transfer the information from the header, the date overtime filled, the date of the overtime, who's filling, and the reason. You can either come over here to the first available column and type these in, just as you did on the other page, or you can just copy and paste if you'd prefer to do it that way. Either way, whichever is easiest for you. So we know we start on the firefighter overtime on the first open shift, which in this instance is Casey. Casey's already on platoon 3, so he can't work it. Let's say the overtime gets to me, and I'm going to take it. Because you've started a column on the firefighters, you do have to finish it out and black it out. And again, X is black it out. That's all you have to do on that. So now you know the next time you start to fill overtime for a firefighter, you'll start with Dave in a new column. The next time you start with officer overtime, you'll start at the top of the column because everyone passed or wasn't eligible for the last shift of overtime. That column's completely filled. You're done with it. So you start at the top whenever that column is completely filled and no one had taken the overtime before. When you're done with that, you just save it and close it. All the changes that you made will be tracked with your name and time and date stamped because you have to log into the server to access it. You can't make changes to this spreadsheet without those changes being tracked. So that adds an extra level of security to this. So that's pretty much the basics of it. The most important thing to remember is that each column represents a shift of overtime you're filling. The column should be completely filled if you start it, with the rare exceptions of military leave or work comp, which I'll cover in the next video. X's for black, type pass for passes, and any number between 12 and 24 to indicate that someone has taken the overtime. The next spot you fill either starts over and down at the next person in the new column or at the top of the column if it's completely